Come on.
Maybe I should put some sort of a timer on. Last time I said something was only going to be 15 minutes and it was longer. People were upset, even though it wasn't me who did that. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I also it's up to you. As I said, like I could do 20. I have as much time as you have, but you have work and I don't. Like I'm
right,
off
right,
sick,
right.
so I can go for 20 minutes, 25 minutes. We can whatever you want to do.
I very very blessed to be able to say that like with my work, I can just adjust when my hours are. So if
Hmm.
we go over, then that just means that I stop later. And that's okay for today for me.
Okay,
I think this would be a great conversation, and at the end of it, we could see if we think it's beneficial to bring in anyone else.
that's fair.
No one else has to. Let's
Yeah.
not put any pressure on it. But I'd love to have the conversation. You know what? I'm going to arbitrarily give you the 20 minutes just just so we got something to shoot for.
Okay. We'll definitely get to 20. I'm not worried. I basically I have notes on all one, two, three, four, all six subjects you brought up in the 10-minute section
That's
that you
so
talked to
good.
about with Luke. So we
Oh,
can talk about any of those or none of them, whatever. Like I
this
have
is
them
this is
though.
the way that I think about it. As soon as I hit start, this is when you're clarifying because that's
Okay.
how I stated that. So as
Okay.
long as we're just more muddied and confused after 20 minutes, I think we followed through with the thumbnail. I
Sounds
think
good.
Grim will still be
Oh,
happy.
and I don't know where you got that picture of me. That's so funny. That was my like I sort of look like Vincent Van Gogh, my wife said. So she took a picture of me looking like
I
Van Gogh in that, and somehow you found it.
You're a friend of mine on Facebook.
I guess.
So
Oh,
I
right. So
went through
Facebook
your
pictures. Oh
pictures
man.
and I didn't ask you which picture you'd want. And so I didn't pick anyone with your wife in it in case
No, it's
for
fine. That's
whatever
good.
reason
No,
she
no, no.
didn't.
That's appropriate. Yeah, just
Yeah.
me. But I just thought it was so funny. That's what
And
you.
you had good pictures where you were obviously younger. So I
Yeah.
was like, no, no, no. I want one that looks like you. I suppose you look a little bit like Alan Grant from Jurassic Park in that one with the
Okay, I see
out.
that. I thought it was more Van Gogh with the blue shirt and the kind of straw hat and the
Well,
red
so that's
beard.
interesting. It's kind of a that's I like your instinct because I thought cowboy when I was looking at that hat.
Uh,
But
I'd
that's
have to
not
re-see it.
your
Yeah, I haven't seen that picture in so many
yeah.
years. And I was like, oh my God. You know how old that picture? You said it's me. It looks like me, but like that picture is probably 15 years old. I'm gonna guess 12 to 15
Okay.
years old. It has to be. Oh, sorry, maybe not quite. I was in Atlanta though. It has to be like 10, at least 10. It's so
I
old.
saw well, yeah, but you have the right amount of beard. Maybe you had a
Yeah, I
cold
know. Well,
and
I would
you look a
grow. No,
couple years
it
older.
might have been the Omer because I grow my beard. Back then when I would shave, I would grow it out during the Omer every year and then back again,
Nice.
right? So anyway, could be the 3 weeks. Yeah, okay. Whenever you want to
Okay,
start.
20 minutes starting now. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi everybody. Um, so this is a follow-up from Luke and David's conversation, I think almost a week ago now,
Mhm.
where David was raring for a fight. So now he did challenge, he threw
Okay.
down the challenge to Chezi, but I
Yeah.
picked up the glove, as it were. Um, so in that conversation, I'll just give you the six things he talked about in this 10-minute span where he was like, this is what Yosef thinks, or this is what Chazi thinks, and we're gonna kind of just go from there. We don't have to talk about all of them. We'll talk about some of them, but they
Mhm.
are, and we can choose. Um, should we call Ishmael a jackass? Eating afikomen or not? Face-to-face encounters and mouth-to-mouth. Um, God's body and its measurements, and eating in His presence. And then I'm going to just knock out one real quick off the bat. El Shaddai, or I would prefer Kel Shaddai because we're using it in a non-sacred context. But this name of God, specifically, we can focus on the Shaddai part. You said it's about breasts, if I remember in that conversation. That is a late rabbinic folk etymology based not
Mhm.
on Hebrew or any of the ancient sources where um, older sources say it has to do with fields like Sadeh and Shaddai because Shin and Sin are interchangeable. But really, if you go back into Akkadian, um, Shadu is mountain, and this is what they would call. They wouldn't take God of the mountain, but they would say gods of the mountain when they're talking about Safon, right? When these
Hmm.
gods are in the anti-Lebanon range, right? And they're specifically Mount Zafon, and there's also Mount Hermon, and there's a couple different mountains up there that were considered sacred mountains, depending on which group you were. And that whatever mountain it was, they would call the god of the mountain. So it seems, I think, like the strongest scholarly side is that it's the god of the mountain. And then later, because we Jews didn't know Akkadian at some point, like that was forgotten, and they connected it to God of the field, and that becomes really important because a whole bunch of academics then argued about, well, what about these the goats of the field and Azazel, and maybe there's a connection there, thinking that that's really what they meant. And then much later, you have this argument, kind of folk etymology argument from the rabbis that it's Shadaim, and it's about breasts, and they connect it to a verse specifically with the word Shadaim in Song of Songs. So, and they're trying to actually, right? It's kind of interesting because mountains and breasts are also interchangeable to some degree. Like Mount Tabor is also like an anatomy part, right? Tabor is
Well, and if you're going to pick a geological element that looks like a breast,
right.
I
It's gonna be a
think,
mountain.
yeah, mountain is
And in
great.
fact, importantly, the temple is said to be between the territories of Benjamin and Judah, as it's on two mountains, and they've kind of filled it in between. And they saw them as one of the ways that it was seen, and as a folk understanding, was that these were breasts, and God was like, and we're like within God's the Shekhinah's like bosom, right? Quite
Mm-hmm.
right. So there was this way to kind of connect it, talk about mythology and geography, like we were. I can't remember,
Yeah,
like Luke
yeah, yeah,
stream or
yeah, yeah.
Jacob stream, whatever stream that just was. This is mythology tied to geography, where this was really about. So like, yes, your reading exists, but it's a specifically rabbinic late reading,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and it's not the academic one. It's kind of interesting. The other thing I'll say quickly, and Shaddai, where it comes up the most is the Book of Job, which is really interesting. And why Job, who's maybe a non-Jew, and from Utz,
Right,
we talk
right,
about
right.
where Utz was, but like it's definitely an Aramean area or an Arab area, depending, but like very much God of the Mountain makes sense in his context. And then of course there is also another rabbinic reading that it's El Shaddai, right? So the God who said enough or made enough, right? So the
Mm-hmm,
sufficiency
mm-hmm.
basically, right? So it's about sufficiency. That's the other way to read it. But again, sufficiency and nurturing and mother, right? Those are connected too. Right. So like that sort of serves as a bridge between the mountain, the breast, and sufficiency, right? As like these three parts. Um,
Do you think with that folk etymology that even if it's not actually true, that it might still hold?
and what do you mean? Hold
So
it in
this
what sense?
this happens in a in a fictional book in it's sometimes called C.S. Lewis's Ransom trilogy, where the guy's name it's given to him for arbitrary reasons. He
Hmm.
knows the etymology of his name, but then he believes that it's tied to the actual concept of being ransomed. And he says it's not an accident. It's all kind of come together, and so
Yeah,
even
well,
if this
that's what
etymology
happens
is not correct.
that's what happens in astrology too, right? Like you have a symbol system, you
Hmm.
apply it to a set of patterns,
Hmm.
you come to believe those patterns are real, whether they're real or not, and then they have
Hmm.
an effect on your life, right? So like this is one of
Yeah.
those things where the symbolism can be effective. I mean, yeah, nominative determinism, sure. We could also just say like, I mean, because we could also call it placebo effect to some degree, but like depending on what your frame is, like you can, right? Like I was given the name Yosef. We do believe that names have powers to shape the
Yeah.
kids, but it's not like a super magical metaphysical thing that the name shapes me. It's just like I will come to understand Yosef in different ways, like the ancestors I'm named for, or the biblical character, or other people who've been named in the history, or the actual etymological
Hmm.
meaning of the name, um, and then live into those in different balances. Names are
Yeah.
usually given. Um, well, it's interesting whether names are given prophetically in the Bible. God doesn't really name people super often. It's almost always a parent, and they're never said to be getting a prophecy at that time. But we do generally, in the tradition, understand the
Hmm.
names as kind of having a prophetic element to them.
Do you know the name? Uh, there's a theory about names where if you took my picture and you gave it to people who have never met me before, and you said, "What is this guy's name? Is his name David or is it Michael or Joseph or
Hmm.
is you should they give you four names and you should get it right 25% of the time, but people get it right 40% of the time, which
Yeah,
means
I mean,
yeah,
it's interesting. It probably means that there's a pattern in, and either
yeah.
there's so many ways that could be understood. There's so many
Yeah.
causative
That I
properties
understand
that
what
it's
a
like,
David looks like,
you're right. Like,
and
but
I've
is that social, cultural, genetic?
right.
Like people from this culture name their kids more like this way, and this person looks like they're more from this culture, right?
Yeah,
There's
but
so many
we've all
ways
met someone named Amanda and said that's not what an Amanda looks
it
like.
could, but like I don't know that you are. If you gave me four really different names from
Yeah,
things like especially Mediterranean names,
right.
some of them that were in Arabic and stuff, like I would have
Yeah,
a hard time saying you were the David, right? Like I might
right,
think
right,
you're the
right, right, right.
Hakim, like easily.
Yeah,
um
And there were names that were options for me as
yeah.
well. And my name,
um
my name's a perfect example. My parents didn't know anything about the Bible. They just thought
yeah,
David and Jonathan were pretty names. They gave me both of them.
yeah, and it's a beautiful combination. Look at that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, another one I think we can knock out quick in our short time, is afikomen. We
Yeah,
eat the afikomen. You have to. It's like I don't understand where your little story about like you're not supposed to eat it and I eat it. Like no, like the commandment, the mitzvah is you have to eat the afikomen before the middle of the night, before right. So
hmm.
like so that I just want to clarify that, or like I don't know where that's part of the story came
No,
from
I'm a
about saying
Gentile. I'm
no,
not supposed
no.
to. Am I? I'm allowed to eat the afikoman?
Anyone can eat the afikomen. I mean, yeah.
I thought that by eating the afikoman at the end, that's participating in the sacrifice.
Okay, so afikomen, afikomen. Okay, let's do a really, really quick understanding of what afikomen is. Afikomen originally probably means an after party. Okay,
Hmm.
It's a Greek word, but it's the Romans. After you have a big
Right.
feast, you go to like another one, and you don't end your party where you're doing. We're gonna go to the
After
after
the
party.
party is the after party,
And
right?
the
Like
rule
the
at Pesach, because you
yeah.
have to eat you have to, the group that is eating the offering has to, you actually register to eat like a specific offering together, and like you can't like change offerings. You can't swap. It's all in Exodus, but it's formalized a little bit more in later rabbinic literature.
Mhm.
Like you can't then go to an after party because you're not participating in the meal that you're supposed to be at. You're supposed to be present at the meal you're at and not thinking about I'm going to go to someone else's meal and crash and like have their dessert or go revel and
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Like it's not supposed to be an after party. After the temple is destroyed, and this is a pre-destruction understanding, right, of Afikomen, because you're actually participating in the lamb and like you can't go to someone else's house after. After the temple is destroyed, there becomes this shift where we start calling, well, first there's a shift that you don't leave the party, and you how do I put this? Like you they want the last thing to the last taste in your mouth to be of your own meal, kind of. So they're preserving the idea of the sacrifice and the lamb as like that should be like the last thing that you've eaten. And like that. And then when there's no more Paschal sacrifices, which actually don't end with the destruction of the temple in 70, they really seem to end around the Bar Kokhba revolt, and they might have come back a little bit when people tried to rebuild the temple at different times. Um, but but as long as there was an altar, you didn't need a temple. You just need an altar for this sacrifice. And the altar was rebuilt both during the Bar Kokhba revolt and during Justinian when he was trying to rebuild the temple. They did finish the altar. So there was attempts at restarting this, not just the Samaritans, but also other Jews who were restarting their Paschal sacrifices. And it should be the last thing you ate. And then once that really ended, and we don't have that lamb offering anymore, we eat a piece of matzah to remind us of this that's the last taste of the meal now because that's all we have. We don't have the lamb anymore. We have the matzah. So this last piece of matzah, this final taste, becomes called the afikomen, which is funny because you're supposed to like not eat anything after the afikomen. You're not supposed to go to the after party. In some ways, like this becomes our we sort of
Yeah.
have an after party, but it's like but
Yeah.
you don't leave the house, right? Like it's at your meal. You have the
Yeah.
matzah, and yeah, and anyone it has to be finished, but because it's only symbolic and it's in remembrance and it's not really the offering. Like yeah, you can eat it. Like now there's a whole thing about like whether non-Jews should even be at like these types of
Right.
meals in the first place, but like insofar as you're already at such a meal, like yeah, then
Yeah.
you can finish eating it. So that's not an issue. Um, the other really fast one I think is Ishmael. So you call him a jackass, like it's a very funny thing.
Yeah.
He's really an onager. Okay, that's what a para
Mm.
is.
Mm-hmm.
An onager is a type of a wild ass.
Mm-hmm.
It is not domesticated. A jackass actually is a domesticated donkey that
Yeah,
hasn't
yeah, yeah,
been
yeah, yeah.
castrated. If we're gonna be super pedantic,
A
we don't.
jackass has to be castrated to be
No,
called
it's non-castrated. So
non-castrated.
it's if it's not, it's a male, it's not castrated, it's a jackass. If
Yeah,
it's been
yeah.
castrated, it's a gelding, right?
Right,
So
right,
this
right.
is, and so there is, but the point here is jackass is its own funny thing because it's a colloquialism.
But there's
And
a
it's about stubbornness, right? Really,
yeah,
being a jackass
and there
origin
is a
is
point that
stuck.
I'm making regarding
Yeah.
that is that is an image within the Bible as well as like one who it's in Jeremiah, the image of a specifically a wild ass when it's in heat can smell the female from far away and like is
Hmm.
running to that thing and can't be stopped as
Yeah.
like an image of the animal instinct of a human being even.
Yeah, and part of it's also just like these are the undomesticated ones. So and there's the para, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the wild ass, the onager, comes up in Job a couple times. I've talked about it with
yeah,
Jess,
yeah, yeah.
and like it's much more about like that you
It's
can't tame them. It's not just that they're
it's it's
stubborn,
it's
but they're
almost
not
like
tameable.
a monster, isn't it? Like would
Well,
have been
no,
conceived
no,
of.
no, not at
No,
all.
no.
And in fact, in Job, they're sometimes positive. It's a mixed. It's rather mixed. It's the it's used to talk about the kids of the people who have hurt him and or like wild or men
Mhm.
who are of low morals, and they have these kids who are um, these wild donkeys, and that they're um, but sometimes it's actually a positive. Sometimes they're running free and they're not able. I mean, Job
Right,
is not a
right,
clear book. They're never a monster.
right.
They're
Mhm,
never evil.
mhm.
They never go that far. Like, and yes, he's a difficult. Like Ishmael is difficult, and he can't be tamed, and
Right,
he's a
right,
very
right.
strong self-preservation instinct, um, and he lives in the open steppes, and especially hold on one second, let me pull it up. There
Yeah,
was something
he
I
lived
had
on the
this
streets.
conversation with Jess about male onagers because there's this whole thing about like do they get along with their brothers and like male onagers actually are famously like there's something about like their herd dynamics where they're super territorial and they have these like bachelor males that like get kicked out
Mm.
um and like they tend to like group together after they get kicked out like with the other bachelor males um because and they yeah there's like this great dynamic with like what these things are and that, like you need to know the species to understand like what's going on with Ishmael and like why this is a it's not really a curse even it's just like
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
even
yeah.
hard to describe but like what his fate and destiny are super tied into like this very specific vision. Okay, everything else is about God's body in my list.
Okay,
And
okay,
we
okay.
have
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
however much time left.
Yeah.
We have different parts of that. I think framing it, do you want to just introduce Benjamin Sommer? Because I mean, that's the key to understanding your position, I think. Or
Right,
like,
right. The
yeah.
bodies of God. Man, look, everything that we're talking about is interesting. So I could go on like people this Ishmael chat. I could talk about Ishmael for much longer because
Yep.
yeah, I do think that the evolution of those words are also important. That like I can't think of a in all Semitic languages references to donkeys are a bit are they not insults and
No, definitely not. There are some cultures in the ancient Near East that really like their donkeys and think they are. In fact, even the Israelites like their donkeys.
yeah yeah
Right, we
yeah
have this
yeah.
interest. The only time we ever
Well, it's
offer
not one dimensional. Even in the
it's
ones where
never
you
one
call someone
dimensional.
a jackass, that's also a
Yeah,
helpful animal.
maybe. But the stubbornness can be positive. It's not always negative, in Semitic
Okay.
languages. And Hamor, right? I mean, this was their beast of burden. This was like one of the most important animals. Like this is how
Mhm.
you sow your fields. This, right? We talked about it last time that a Homer,
Yeah.
a volume measurement for
Yeah.
how much seed you need is based on how
Okay.
much donkey can carry.
Okay.
Anyway,
Sorry.
oh yeah, go back.
Let me just ask one question before we get into the God's body business.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So before we get into the God's body business, so there is not any restrictions on a Gentile participating in something that is supposed to remind you of the
No, no
the
more than the
sacrifice.
rest. No more than the rest of the meal.
Okay.
If you were
Okay.
actually, if it was actually the temple and you were there, like, yeah, we
Okay.
would talk about it. We would have a different conversation, or at least the altar. We'd have a very different conversation. But yeah, there is a
Okay.
question, a very specific halachic question
Yeah.
about whether you're allowed, if you're allowed to, unlike on Shabbat, you're allowed to
Yeah.
cook on holidays. Like you're allowed to cook on holidays. You're allowed to use fire for cooking purposes.
Hmm.
There's a question on whether you're allowed to do extra cooking for non-Jews or just cook for yourself. And
Okay.
like, and there's
That
so
makes this makes a lot of sense for me because
yeah.
in the description in Exodus, it implies that non-Jews might be participating.
Um, it does, though I would say that the specific word it uses points to something close to what we would call now Noahites. We can talk about that. But people who have accepted some amount of
Yeah.
participation in your community, um, and they have to be circumcised, which is also it's more than Noahides because
Yeah.
they're circumcised Noahides, and this is where like the
Yeah.
Christian stuff maybe get interesting. But this was supposed to be one question before we talked about God's body, and our 20 minutes is almost up, man. So
Yes.
I'm like
Yeah.
looking at that.
We have a minute and 42. Okay. You know what? We're good. I'm just gonna say this. If Hezi wants to jump in because he's over here, and I made comments about fighting Hezi, I'm all right with being double teamed between the two of you. I think that's fine.
Okay.
So
To
Hezi's allowed, but everyone else just has to watch.
so I want to start though, like
Yeah.
with Benjamin Sommer. So Benjamin Sommer is a modern serious Bible scholar. I just
Yes.
finished his book on Revelation and Authority, which is an excellent work. I won't say I agree
Okay.
with every single bit of it, but
Yeah.
if you want to see a really strong argument for how people who believe in the documentary hypothesis can still be observant Jews, and believe in the oral Torah,
That's good.
and have a very strong participation theology, and like
Yeah.
deeply believe in prophecy, like he has probably the best theology around the documentary hypothesis that still allows one to be traditional that I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That being said, like I don't agree with him,
Yeah.
but it's he's very smart and he's very well thought out. Going back to a conversation we've had before, though, I don't know if it's been I don't remember if it was public or private, but one conversation we've had before is a lot of people want to take the biblical text and they see parallels to the ancient Near East and they automatically think, oh, this means that the ancient Israelites believed in this God or
Right.
this
Right.
ritual or this is how this worked, as opposed to reading the biblical text as engaging with those things and then deliberately undermining a lot of it,
Right. 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 Right.
right?
Right.
And we agree on that. So
Right.
when I read Benjamin Summers' Bodies of God, which is one of his earlier works, um, he's just as smart then. It's a little more academic than the Revelation and Authority book, but
We just hit 10 minutes. We just
yeah,
hit
20
20
minutes.
minutes. I don't care. Keep going.
Okay. I think when I read his book, as interesting and cool as it is, that he's overreading and bringing in, and instead of seeing how it undermines the text,
Right.
he's bringing in and saying, actually, no, they were just like the polytheists, and they did believe in the body of God, that he had a physical, locatable body that was made
Right.
of some sort of fluid light stuff that was called kavod. And it's been a long time since I read it, so if I make a mistake, correct me.
That's fine.
Um, and and it could be localized. And like, yes, he didn't like really eat, but like he could consume the essence of food and things
Right.
by
Right.
through
Right.
the smoke. And he could touch you, and it had like actual physical measurements.
Yeah.
And when I read that, I basically see him overreading and bringing in a lot more of the stuff that the Bible was intentionally trying to
Correct.
undermine and get rid of. And I think he overreads. And even
Yeah.
though some of the stuff he does read comes up again later in Kabbalah, and that is true. And he actually
Hmm.
think his
Hmm.
his book gives some basis for Kabbalah for some readings.
Yeah.
Obviously, like a Kabbalist would never actually agree with his book at 100% or even 90%. Like there's so many places where he does go and overread much more paganism into it. And Mark Smith um, has a great rebuttal to Summer on this exact point. I mean, he says like this is. I mean, And part of this also has to do with what your understanding of
Right.
the documentary hypothesis is. And if do you
Right.
so for Summer, he really strongly believes in the documentary hypothesis, and in fact, a slightly
And
outdated
he
version.
would say that there's contradictory
He would
texts
say it's
that are
contradictory.
purposely put next to each other,
Right. He says there's no
which is what
problem.
you and me both would disagree with.
Right. He
Like,
says there's no problem if there's contradictions, that
yeah,
there were different contradictions, and
yeah,
that the editor didn't try to get rid of the contradictions, but kept them in there on purpose. And that's just like later in the Jewish tradition when we keep in the minority position in an argument. Right? He's going to see a continuity there in the oral
right,
Torah and
right,
say
right.
this is how they did it. And the priestly text, specifically source P in his documentary
Yeah,
hypothesis,
yeah, yeah.
is comfortable. And it's the only one. None of the other ones are. It's the one that's comfortable with this localized physical God. Now, there are people who have actually argued that source P isn't internally, that's
Yeah.
inconsistent. He says that's okay because source P itself can be made of multiple parts and it could be one via in source P. It's like this whole thing. Part of his documentary hypothesis is outdated, which is also like challenging because like if you look at the latest documentary hypothesis work, it doesn't quite agree with his. Okay, fine. He is also, as far as I know, the only other non-Christian Jewish person who has agreed with him on a literal reading is was not a super famous heretic, but he was he got super involved in a Maimonidean argument. Not surprisingly, he lived a lot later. His name was Moses Taku, and Moses Taku did argue that actually like things like Shir Koma were literal, and Ezekiel was literal, and the Kavod was literal, and that's it. Thousands of years. No one else has read it that way. And in fact, even when we look at the earliest texts, Dead Sea Scrolls, Qumran, like post-biblical texts, Maccabees, no one else agrees with him on this reading. So it's not just like, hey, this was this wasn't just some innovation of the medievals, and it wasn't just some innovation of the rabbis in the 2nd century, and it wasn't even some innovation in the Hellenistic period. Like no one, including this other sources against source P in the Tanakh, in his own reading, are comfortable or agree with him that it's this physical reading, which makes me think like maybe it isn't actually a physical reading. If no one, because they don't even seem like that
Yeah. So
bothered by it.
one of the theories that kicks around is that partially why Maimonides requires like felt the need. There's a concept in ancient laws. If you find an ancient law and it's saying you don't do a certain thing, it's a good way of knowing that they did a certain thing, right? If you have restrictions about worshiping using a sacred tree, what that means is that some people worshiped using a sacred tree.
Right, but they don't necessarily need to be your people, right? They can be the
Right,
people outside,
right,
and
right.
that's
Could be right next door that
we
are
see this a lot with Judaism and Christianity, where they define
right,
themselves against each other. This is the whole point of the Boyarin
right,
thesis.
right.
And
But
Siegel,
I do think that it seems to be something he's addressing within his own community when Maimonides is saying God has no body.
well, whose community?
In
And Moses Taku's community?
well, okay.
He doesn't have a community, so far we can tell. So, like, I don't know. He seems to be this voice of like. Now there is Alan Siegel made an argument. This is the original guy who did the two powers in heaven before Boyarin, right? Alan Siegel made this argument years ago that what was happening and the reason we had there were two powers heresy in the first place was that people were taking mystical visions and they were having visions, and some of these visions were very real and felt physical, and like that, they were like seeing things in the world, but they were visions, like operating a different, prophetic trance level of experience mode, whatever. And then people were describing them as real, and then other people were saying, well, so I'm going to take this visionary reading and understand it as literal, and then I'm going to like, and that's where the heresy started. It was like they when basically like people who didn't really know and didn't have these like big frameworks, and they were like starting to take things too literally. And I mean, I could totally believe that because I see this all the time in the New Testament, where or in the Qumran, where like there's readings that we read much more with a much heavier emphasis on spiritual allegorical components, even if they still have a literal sense.
Yeah.
But they want to say it's either literal or it's not true. And this we can talk about this with transubstantiation to some degree. I mean, I think it's part of that same argument. So this could just be a general tendency that they're arguing against, that humans, like with we're doing this naturally take
Yep.
these things and take them too literally, and then they're trying to push back. Look, Luke's in the chat, so taking things too literally. I know he would have lots to say about it. Yes, Acher Metatron, right? So taking things too literally is another example there of the thing. I will say though, one thing that really bothers me
Well, and
about some.
even the idea that
Oh,
Metatron gets to sit on the throne of God for an hour every single day, right, is trying to
well, no,
deal
no,
with the fact
he doesn't sit on
that
the throne of God. He gets to sit in God's presence. That is
okay,
not on his throne. Gets to sit on his presence, which you're not allowed to sit in God's presence. I mean, that's part of like so that in fact the whole discussion about that scene
right,
happens because in the Talmud when they're talking about are you allowed to sit in the temple courtyard or not, and like are kings allowed to sit in the temple courtyard, and like who has permission to sit before the divine. So
right.
like it's not on God's throne. It's just sitting in his presence as a sign of respect or disrespect, right? So or like are you just so great that God will
Yeah.
like um he
Well, and
permits
so
it. He permits like it's not a denigration of his respect, but like he says like it's okay to sit in my presence, even and I won't take that as a sign of disrespect to me because like you
well,
are
and
also great.
I hope that I was, when I was talking with Luke, respectful of your your perspective, in that part of what I was saying, because I think what a Christian would normally do is just dismiss the Jewish perspective as
Oh
they're just not taking these things literally. And I just went, well, what? It's weird what it's doing, and so you have to come up with a weird explanation for it.
yeah, and look, I mean Christians are the masters of this, right?
Yeah,
Christians are the masters of spiritualizing a text and trying to not read it literally. I mean this was what the church fathers did for hundreds of
right,
years
right.
until like the 11th century exegetes
Yeah,
of
and
the church
so
like started like trying to take this more seriously. No,
so if
sorry,
you,
not seriously
like,
is the wrong word,
when
but
when
taking the
Isaiah
literally.
has a vision, and this is partially why it's considered the priestly source that considers God to have a body. When Isaiah is looking up into, I had a vision and I could see the train of God's robe filling the temple. It's in his mind. It sounds like when he's describing seeing God, he sees a giant man in a robe sitting on a
Well,
chair.
so I don't know that he sees a man. He sees the bottom. He sees maybe feet. He sees the hem. He doesn't say he sees the man, and this is part of
Okay,
the
I okay,
right
I will
Ezekiel.
agree
Right?
with that,
Yeah,
but it sounds like human feet though,
it
right?
does. It does sound
It
like it does
not the
let
feet of a calf.
in Ezekiel and in
Yeah,
Daniel,
yeah,
and the Book of Enoch, right? In that line of those three specifically, they do seem to perceive something with human-like dimensions
yes,
sitting on the throne. Absolutely. The
yeah,
question there is more about like are we talking about visions? Are we talking about like what
yeah,
do you do with
yeah,
that
yeah,
vision?
yeah.
Are you allowed to represent that vision? And then this gets to the Shir Koma discussion. So you said like something that Jews won't talk about. I'm going to talk about it. There's a book called Shir Koma. Shir Koma literally means the measure of the stature or the
Yes.
body. Um,
I,
now,
this
but the
this
thing about
part of
Shir,
it is like
but
in
but
rabbinic literature. I mentioned this where they're
but
like,
but but rabbis are very very anonymous that God does not have
yeah,
a physical body. The people who are writing Shir Koma, I would argue, like it's very clear. If we could talk about Benjamin Summer and Kavod, an ancient Canaanite, and maybe this
yeah,
one
yeah,
source
yeah, yeah.
P guy, in his, maybe he, okay, fine, but we're talking about thousands of years later, and guys who are within the rabbinic circles,
Mm-hmm.
right, who are writing a text and and as soon as you open it, it's not literal because they're talking about sizes
Yeah,
like that are tens of thousands or millions, right? Like, we're huge, 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 and all the numbers are super symbolic. And you're like, it's pretty clear that they're not actually talking about the measures of like a physical being here, because like that everything is like it's very like one we know that this group of people didn't believe that it was physical, and then two everything about these measures are unbelievably large and like in ways that like make the human mind can't really get around. They're not numbers that like we now I guess with cosmology, like with proper cosmology, like
mm-hmm.
we know like okay we can talk about 13 billion years universe or like this many light years away, but like it's still really like these are numbers that don't like for us to really grasp is hard. And they're talking about these numbers as if they're like, okay, this every day, whatever. Like
Right, right, right,
they're
right.
clearly not trying to be literal with the numbers, and the numbers clearly have meanings and symbolic, and they're putting that all in there. No one thought it
Yeah,
was symbolic. This is not. I mean, we can talk about like this debate around the Quran. I mean, I know Claire's not on, but like in the Quran, we could talk about God having
right,
one
right,
eye,
right.
or or being have two right hands, whatever it is, they're
Yeah, and he's got it's you can't mistake the what's it called, the Antichrist for Allah because he has two eyes or he
yes,
has one
he has
eye
one
and
eye
your
and
Lord is
Lord has
not one
two
eyed.
eyes. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but this whole thing is like
But
there. I think it's a lot
it
less.
seems like when they're thinking about God, it sounds like, do you know who Galacticus is?
No.
It's a Silver Surfer's like
Oh, okay.
villain is this giant thing that eats planets and stuff like so when it's a picture of him it's the image of like an ant before this like massive.
I see. But at the same, like it's just too. I can see why that argument works in the Quran because we're talking about a group of people who were, in theory, were just pagans and now are becoming monotheists and like coming to these ideas and like they're going to see God in a different way. I get that. I think the argument that the authors or author Quran, Muhammad, I guess, whatever, right, or Gabriel, depending on how you understand it, like is like there I think the argument of whether it's literal or not is a lot harder to like figure out because like we don't know the cultural context of the person writing the Quran in the same way that we do know for the rabbis writing Shir Koma.
Right,
And even with Shir Koma, even with the, it's very clearly symbolism and everything, people like Maimonides are really against it, including and also Maimonides' opponents are really against it. If I remember, Ravad are really against it because they're afraid that people will take it too literally. I mean, that is the same problem that we talked about earlier. They're like, this book, like, they don't say that the book actually, like, they say the book is dangerous because it misleads people into thinking in the wrong way about God. And
well, and
the book isn't clear enough.
there becomes based on this as well, which I don't know how much we're allowed to talk about it, but in the Merkava mysticism, this becomes a thing too, like don't talk about it, don't.
Well, it's even before that. I mean, the Talmud has it already, but it's not that
Right?
it's that this stuff you need a lot of background for to understand that it's not literal, and you need a
Yeah.
lot of things to shape. I mean, this gets so common. I told PBK this week in one of his videos, is like the amount of shaping you need to do perspectively, and to be ready for like some things is really hard, and like for to see someone else's sacred social order is really difficult because it is a perspectival shift, and the only way you get there is doing you'd start with participation and procedural and propositional, and eventually you build
Yeah.
your view so you can actually like see what they're talking about. But to Luke's point, you can't like sit in someone else's,
Yeah. So
um
sorry, I wanted to say this regarding Kezi's
yeah.
thing because this appears in the Talmud, which is no contradiction. One is the Ancient of Days, and one is David Amelech.
That is one position. I mean, there's one of many
Yes, yeah,
positions on this slide.
that's part of like
Generally, though, that's actually not the accepted position. So
okay,
it's a generally we sing this every Shabbat in Ashkenazi circles, at least, right? In this Anim Zmirot in one of the hymns at the end of services where we say he's both. That God is both. That God appears to different people in different ways, like through different
okay,
masks and mediation. So this brings me to face and mouth to mouth. You said when you're talking about face to face that but Yosef would say, in fact, I think this was Yosef, not Chazi. He said Yosef would say, that this is either not literal, and you go with like you can't see my face, and you didn't see a body on Sinai, and like that's the side that wins, or you have this other reading where the angel of God can have God's name in it and appear. So face to face is an Akkadian idiom, and it means, and we mean, we know in numbers they talk about it as talking to your friends, but we also know generally in the Mari archives and other Akkadian texts that it means that you have that you're meeting someone without a mediator between you. So it's like so it's usually used for like when generals come together or when a vassal comes before a
yeah,
king,
yeah, yeah,
but like there's no mediator. So in this case, face to face literally means that it's not an angel of God. It can't be. Like it's fact that this is God, no angel with his name in it. Like this is a non-mediated interaction. At the same time, seeing my face is also an idiom in these same cultures. We have it in the Amarna letters. So
yeah.
also overlapping with Mari, but this is writing to the Egyptian pharaoh. So the Egyptians also know this, where seeing my face is essentially like you can't see my face is like you can't stare at the sun. Like if you stared at the sun, you would go blind. My face is like too powerful, it would kill you. So you can actually, but you can have both in the same time. You can both be face to face with someone, as in talking to someone without
Well,
mediation,
and that becomes
and not go blind at the same time. And that's not a rabbinic innovation or like trying to make the Aristotelian God or whatever fit. Like that is the idiom in use
yeah.
in this period.
But
So to me,
it's
it's
very
much more consistent.
because at things like Peniel, which gets named after this concept of like the face of God,
Maybe.
is I was before the face of God and I lived, and this
Right.
becomes for any other nation that could be before the face of God could hear His words and yet live, right? So it's this weird thing. That's what I mean by okay. On one side, we want to say He was in front of His face and it should kill him, but also that it didn't.
Well, no, it shouldn't kill him. You can be in front. You can be face to face and not be
But then
killed.
there's no point in saying and yet lived,
No,
isn't it?
no. Um,
Because if he's only in front of the mediation, if the mediation doesn't kill you, then it's no longer a miracle. If I said a giant rock fell on him and yet he lived, and then it's no, it was just a pebble. Well, then it's no longer incredible that a giant rock fell on
yeah,
him.
I hear you. I hear you. I hear you.
Right?
I'm going to suggest something.
Because it
I'm going to suggest something. I can
Yeah.
talk to you face if let's say I'm looking at the sun and I can't look at it directly because I would go blind. So what
Yeah.
do? I put on a
Yeah.
pair of sunglasses, right?
Yes.
Like you put on, and this is veiling. Like we were talking. I know
Yeah.
you brought up veiling earlier.
Yeah.
You can talk to someone's face and be face to face, and they can still have a veil on, and you haven't obviated or destroyed the fact that their face would destroy you. Is that they are
Yeah.
covering you or protecting you, and this is the scene with Moses. Right, this is the scene where Moses is literally being being covered by God's hand because he needs a.
Describe it as being without mediation. What's the point of
No,
saying there's no
veil.
mediation and I should die and yet I didn't?
No. But there's a difference between a mediator and a
Yeah.
veil. I want to like push this point. A mediator
Okay.
and a veil are not the same thing. And I think we tend to collapse them because we think of that like, well,
Right.
when I have my sunglasses, that is both a mediator and a veil. Sort of.
Yeah.
But if you think about this very literally, like in the face-to-face circadian context.
Is there not literally a humanoid form that is sitting with Moshe and the leaders eating with them?
Oh no, well, one, it doesn't say he eats with them. So like that you're adding. Be very careful.
Okay.
It says no, look, let's pull it up. Exodus 34, 20, and 21, right?
Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether or not he's eating. Okay, so who is that there? Is that an angel? Is that a mediator of some kind?
I'd say they're having a vision while they're eating this feast. To me, they're having a vision while they're eating the feast.
So they're not actually seeing anything real.
Well, it's a vision. I don't know. Is it real or not? Okay. They really feel like they're seeing something. I mean, everyone like I don't know that anyone else would see it if they were present. They're having a vision while they're eating of being in God's presence, and they're having this vision of the divine throne. They actually don't.
So it's an image which exists in their brains, not in the real world.
I am not quite that Kantian. I think God is. Yeah. I mean, there's something that they're perceiving in the real world that is giving them this vision of it becomes more transjective than that. Like I wouldn't say it's like just in their brain, but the way that they're perceiving what they're doing and under the and it might just be like looking at the sky, right? The color of the sky is the color of this up here. So like, when they see the sky, they see God in the sky. Like talk about liturgies of the wild, like. Everyone else is seeing the same blue sky, and they may not be having that apprehension of it. So I'm not saying it's just in their brain. I think that there is like something going on there, but it doesn't say it does not say, and this is really important, that it doesn't say he's eating with them. In fact, nowhere in the Bible will you ever find it say God is eating. Really interesting. God never eats or drinks, and Benjamin Summer sort of contends with this a little bit, but probably could do more. And a lot to our point, like the other gods ate or drank or somehow consumed food, and God is never described as doing that. The most he's ever described as is smelling, right? But him like.
So when he has a vision of three, when Moshe sees the three, and one of them is identified as Hashem, and Abraham.
Oh,
when
no.
Abram sees the three, and one of them
none of them
are
Hashem. None of them are Hashem. It's very clear. This is where that's an Eastern Orthodox reading. For us, we read the text a little more carefully, I have to say. It says that he's in God's presence before the three of them show up. He says the God's with him. So if you're going to say God's there, he's not one of the three. He's already with them. And then he then talks to God away from the three guys and then comes back to them. And then when they leave, he talks to God again. So this is why we have this whole idea of like you leave, even if you're talking to God, you go and greet your guests and take care of them and like do this commandment of taking care of your guests and being a host. Is more important than talking to God because Hashem is not one of the three. Now, the Eastern Orthodox say one of those guys might be Jesus, like or Hashem or whatever. Like that's a very different reading, but to me, it's not a careful reading of where it's very clear in the text. If you read it chronologically, you can talk about whether the text should be chronological. That's a whole other discussion. But like that, Hashem is not one of the three guys. The three guys are angels. Traditionally, we see them as Gabriel, Michael, and Raphael. Right now, they're humans. I mean, by angels, I mean these guys are sent by God. I don't actually mean that they're metaphysical beings made of energy, kavod, light. Right? I mean that I think there are actually three humans there. Right. At least that's what he's perceiving. And I think they're real. No, I think they actually are humans. It's just like the three spirits that are within them are these three angelic kind of forces. Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit more. Chazi might disagree with me. Rambam does say it's all a dream. Maimonides goes the furthest and says that the entire scene is a dream. And basically from, I think, like when the three guys show up all the way to the destruction of Sodom, he says it's all a single prophecy that Abraham is having. And then when he wakes up, so like he's talking to God, he's sick, he just had his circumcision, he's having this vision, dream state of the three angels and being told about this kid and that Sodom's going to be destroyed, and he sees in his head that Lot is going to be saved. And then when he kind of wakes up from the dream, Sodom, the sky is smoking, and he hears that Lot is safe in the mountains. And like that is a very different way to read this whole thing.
Right.
Anyway, we have so many people. Chazi wants a link. I know I'm bugging him.
Oh, that's right. Okay. You know what? I'm gonna share this, but I'm gonna be a jerk about it. So I'm gonna share, but I'm gonna make a decision in the moment based on my gut instincts whether or not I want this person in on our conversation. And I'm just gonna admit that that's part of it. I wasn't sharing it before because I was just like, Kezi has access to this channel. He can just jump on.
He could. There he is. Okay.
My arch nemesis. That's not.
He's true. In his Sith.
Yeah. It's my
dark Hezi.
It's my fourth week in war garb. You know, I don't care about clothing anymore. I was gonna mention. First off, I hope both you guys are doing well, and Yosef, I hope you're feeling better. You know where you could see this clearly with Hanoch and his wife. She sees the angel and he tells her, you're going to have a son. He's going to, this whole, he gives her this whole story. She goes back to Hanoch and tells her, dude, the messenger, look what happened. Come with me. She starts running back. We did this in the Bible study, right? She starts running back there. He's walking behind her, right? Because he's like, I'm not impressed by the story. Then he sees the dude. He's not like, he doesn't fall on the ground immediately. He's like, this is like an angel. He starts asking him questions. He's like, what's the deal? You mean
Manoach? You mean Manoach?
Manoach, sorry. What I
said. Yeah. I was still following. I'm like, I think I'm right.
And he asks the angel or the man, he says, what's the deal? And the guy says, everything your wife told you. And only then does he realize that this is like an angel, quote unquote, a messenger by God.
Doesn't he have to light the offering on fire for him to actually know? Says, I'll prove it to you.
He disappears. Yeah, the guy disappears in the fire of the sacrifice or something.
Yeah, and is that man also standing in for Hashem? Like some people think. Yeah. No. Okay. All right.
But my point was, he saw a dude that looked like a regular dude.
Yeah. The reason why is, why do you ask my name? It is wonderful. And some people would say that it's a reference to like the idea of Hashem. I'm not going to say the name. My name is too wonderful or something like that.
I mean, you see this also with Jacob and the angel when he's fighting. He tells him, "Tell me what your name is." He doesn't give him an answer.
Why do you ask my name? Yeah.
There's plenty of the Ralbag, for example, talks about that also being a dream, right? And the idea in the Talmud that talks about how a dream is 1/60th of prophecy. So when you asked, is it like Yosef, is it a vision? I would say it's both.
But the man walks up, when he walks away, he is limping. He's limping for real.
Yeah, people have that.
Psychosomatic. It's
So
psychosomatic.
Psychosomatic. People have writer's block.
Okay.
By the way,
I am really not satisfied with dude is asleep and has a Charlie horse and says that it was the God of the Lord of hosts. I just find this so unsatisfying.
But it's both, as in it's so intense. The experience is so intense, right?
Yeah.
Where we hear, the Israelites come and say, stop, Moses, we can't handle more of this or we're going to die, right? As in being in that, and we know that many of the prophets, unlike Moses, right, when post-prophecy, they crumble, they fall, they shake, they can't handle it. Moses is the one walking out, still smiling. And again, I wrote this in the comment, the veil he puts on after he leaves is to let the Israelites experience a little what he experienced, which is like, you clearly see it's Moses, yet there's a veil on my face.
Right.
So I have an interesting point on that. The story of Moses taking his tent and leaving the camp, and everyone looking at his back as he's walking past them, I think is very deliberately supposed to be him recreating the moment on the mountain, right, with God. But what's really weird is if you read when he puts on the veil, he comes down, he doesn't know that his face is shining. He talks to them, they tell him, dude, your face is shining. He puts on the veil, but then it says he takes off the veil when he tells them the word of God and puts it back on after. So a lot of people say he puts on the veil when he's talking God's words, but it's actually the opposite in the text. Which is weird because you would think, well, is he experiencing God veiled or unveiled? And is he trying to convey that with, which direction, right? Is it that like when I'm talking these words, like they need to be veiled because they're too powerful and you need to see these words through a glass darkly? Or is it like when I'm talking the words of God, I want you to see as much as you can of this kavod, this shining, whatever, and have that experience. And then when we're not in those kind of moments, that's when I veil, because like that's when it's just like we cover the ark when we're transporting it or something, right? Like when we're not in those states or spaces that where it's appropriate to like unveil.
Would that imply though that this idea that there is veils between him and Hashem when they're speaking, that those are also gone when Hashem is speaking with him?
It seems that there's a veil while Hashem's speaking with him, and that veil is God's hand, right? I mean, that's sort of what's described, or it's Hashem being turned around, right? Like there's kind of, we get both descriptions. Right. Even if he's in his presence, right? I can talk to you in your presence without a mediator, and you can have your back toward me. And that is still how friends talk to each other sometimes. And I can be in your presence without a mediator, and you could be wearing a mask. And by mask, we can talk that physical, but we can also talk about it more kind of abstractly, that like you're not showing me your full self, you're showing me like an aspect of you for this conversation, and you're not telling me everything about yourself.
Which I believe gets reiterated again, right? I said this in the comments in the famous story of the parties, right? Which is like there's multiple levels of how you're going to read the text, and at all those levels, there's an element of truth in them. But Rabbi Akiva warns his boys that are going in with him, says when you get into these places, don't assume that you understand what you see. As in, he says the term is don't say water when you see like these pillars of water. That's a whole deep conversation what they mean. But the attitude is you're going to see a vision. Don't then come back out of this vision like Elisha ben Avuya did, like Acher did, right? When he sees Metatron, this throws him off. He's confused. He doesn't understand what he's seeing over there. Now, he doesn't die and he doesn't lose his mind. So you could say the force is strong with him still. Nevertheless, he still comes out of that experience very confused.
There's
I will also say that it doesn't say what it means by water, and there's conversation about what it means.
Oh, tons. Yeah.
It just tells you don't say water, and you're like, oh, good. Now it's all clear. Don't say water.
Well, it's more than that. It's don't confuse this marble stone to be water, right? That's part of it. The marble's important. But I just want to add,
by the way, marble when the sun's hitting it and everything actually does look like it could be liquid.
Right. I was just listening to the 1840 YouTube channel, which is great. Is doing a 40 Jewish mystics. They're kind of like asking them all the same questions and like seeing what their different answers are. It's kind of been interesting. their choice has been interesting. The last one who got on, I can't remember her last name, but Tova, I think was her first name. She, as a major Jewish educator in LA, who does a lot of stuff with Chabad, she was saying when she reads that story, she understands it as when you have a mystical experience, you basically you end up with all four of those parts. So part of you ends up kind of being a little bit of a heretic after a mystical experience. Part of you ends up going mad. Part of you ends up dying, and part of you ends up coming out as if nothing had changed. And you have it's just it was such a fun and cool way to read that story.
It's true. It's true, isn't it? It's just oh yeah, that crazy thing happened to me. I'm still living but Bill's got to get paid. So
yeah, and so you come back to it.
I think again, this is why it relates. The Talmud says that each prophet has his own his own style, right? Is how he's prophesizing. You also have to put that in the context of the thing they know, right? Like I'm saying, unlike some are saying that we're stealing from the pagans, nevertheless, they're using language that's around them at the time, right? The things that they're seeing, right? So I'm saying again, the chariot rider is obviously saying that that is a phrase that we are taking. However, when you see the cherubs, there's nothing. I'm saying so that
right. So this gets into they're using all these idioms.
The cloud rests on it. So you
not
see
really.
something.
No, the cloud doesn't rest on the cherub.
The cloud fills the Mishkan,
the whole room, the whole space. It doesn't just rest on the cherub.
And there's no space for Moses.
Sorry, maybe. That's part of the purpose of the incense. The incense is also recreating that cloud so that you can't actually see what's seated on the throne.
Well, no. So this is this big debate. Is this about the kavod? And Summer has a very unique position on this. But is the cloud there as a veil? Mm-hmm. Is the cloud the kavod itself? Right. There is this whole question, and it's we have to be pretty careful with it because it's not clear. Speaking of very personalized prophetic experiences. Who is Sybil's oracle? In the comments,
I don't know. They sound.
It's not. It's. I would say it's Claire, except they.
They sound Claire adjacent. I don't
know. It could be a new Muslim in our corner, which would be cool. But I'm very curious. Sybil's oracle. If you want to introduce yourself.
This reminds me more of the famous story of of Solomon and the bee.
Yes. Well, which is a late. It's not like a midrash, right? It's a super late made up.
Same thing with the crazy story with his daughter, the Rapunzel story.
Oh yeah. Awesome. And his throne, so Solomon's throne bears a lot of resemblance. The myth of Solomon's throne, which is a very late medieval myth about there's earlier stuff about it, but it becomes this very cool medieval myth where it has lions that are living as part of it and stuff. Turns out the throne of the Byzantine emperor had animatronic lions and had a lot of these features. There's a really cool kind of thing that understands the Byzantine throne, how Solomon's throne inverted. Interesting.
Yeah. So in trying to represent this as well, it seems, how do I even talk about it? I try to represent it as weird. I try not to just take the Orthodox perspective being that's clearly Jesus. That's just Jesus shows up for in the prequel, they just had him show up again, and isn't that great, and everything else. Whereas I want it to be weird, and I don't like jumping to what I feel is a later rabbinic explanation for it. I like to hold it as weird and open up the possibility of the weirdness of it. It does sound if I said right now, close your eyes, and I want you to picture the image of a cat, right? You come up with an image of a cat. If I said, okay, picture the image of a dog, you picture the image of a dog. If I said, picture the image of God, there is a correct answer. A human is the image of God. So whatever you picture better look like a person, right?
A person, I would say a person. Maybe I shouldn't say that. I would say with the prism of the Torah, seeing another person allows you to see the divinity of God in him.
Well, sure.
Not everyone's looking through the prism of the Torah, right? Jacob sees God in Esau, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
totally.
But
which is why we know that God is a redhead.
Right, but that's post his war. I mean, that's post the post his psychosomatic experience, right? I'm saying he is now, there's a deep understanding that he has, which then allows him to make a sentence like that and say a sentence like that. He's like, because I've seen God's face. Like, now I understand what I need to be looking for. Where can I identify God's elements through these things? But
he does he, sorry, now I just want to get nitty gritty into specifically that passage. He thinks it's Esau, right? Because he's waiting to encounter Esau thinking it's going to be a conflict. And then a man jumps out of the bushes and starts wrestling him.
It's not clear. I mean, the context is everyone is tucked away and everyone's sleeping, right? Then dear old dad, right?
I love the ambiguity. It sounds like God just jumps out of the bushes.
I'm saying he decides to do something reckless, and it says he went to go look for like little pots that fell. Like if I was his sons, I'd be like, where are you going? Absolutely not. No, don't get those old Pokemon cards. Like, we don't need them. There's a whole war's going on. Now, the interpretation I like is like, he's like, these are little pockets of guilt, right? That he's still dealing with. I still lied to him. I tricked him. I'm coming back right now. Now I'm going to do this. So he's dealing with this whole inner battle that's going on right now. That's also, why is the angel not stronger than him? What is this? What is this stalemate?
He is stronger than him. The angel just has to touch him with this special angel.
They're wrestling.
His hip gets thrown out of whack.
They're wrestling.
He's got him in a submission pose, and then he just goes. Boop. So he
wrestles him until dawn. He says, "You have to let me. You have to let me loose already." Right. So clearly, he has a grab on him. I would say this is more of someone pumping themselves up in front of the mirror before, like, they're going to the big day. And once they've wrestled the Esau inside them as well, right? But so now they're ready.
Yeah, this is the warm-up match. Right? You have to warm up, and you have to at the gym.
No, it's worse than that. He is limping to his fight against Esau.
Yeah.
Now he's
He got hurt.
Handicapped, even when Esau, already super strong, and as I think we can all agree, Esau could slit an elk's throat from like 30 yards away, right? That we all agree that midrash is literal. And like, I love this image of, face to face. He says that I encounter God face to face, and then says, looking at your face is like looking at the face of God, which actually is, by the way, this image, why this image of Jesus has red hair. It's important.
Yeah. And Muhammad has a red beard, right?
Muhammad is a redhead. Yeah, that actually is. That's historical. I agree with that. You've seen the picture of his grandson, right?
That's why I brought this to this conversation.
You've seen his grandson, right? His grandson's a redhead too.
Muhammad's grandson? How would I have seen Muhammad's grandson? You have his kids.
Let's try
the
this.
Wallet with his kids.
Let's try this from the outside, right? What is the experience that Balaam has? Right? He's a Sith Lord. He's a legit dude, right? Nevertheless, he doesn't know what's flying. He's not seeing the angel off the bat. He doesn't even understand. Like, now the donkey is feeling there's this tension. There's a sense of something is going on over here that I can't move forward, right?
We're back to the good donkeys, David. Here we go. Here's our example. This is the good donkey. His great what was it supposed to be?
Yeah,
it's one of his descendants. Okay. Yeah. There you go. Chazi, do you have tefillah now? Isn't it 2:00?
9:00.
9. Okay.
Well, we didn't change the clock.
An hour. Okay, you didn't change your clock, so it's an hour. Okay. I don't want to delay. I know David is.
So David, come on. Let's fight. What else?
I will at the end of it. Like, I will bless you at the end of it. How about that? You.
it's really it's not literal. Listen, obviously Maimonides goes out there, right? He's like, he's not having any.
None of it's literal. None of it's
right.
real.
Now, he also goes as far as saying anyone that thinks otherwise is a heretic. Now we know he gets called out for that, because obviously there's other rabbis out there that do talk about God in that manner. But the reason we don't look at them as the reason we don't they're still called rabbis, because we also know that they don't ultimately think that God is walking around. The book of Daniel barely made it in. That wasn't even wasn't clear.
It's writings. It's not even prophetic.
Well, Ezekiel had more of a debate than Daniel, but yeah.
Yes, Ezekiel also had like a huge debate if that's going in or not. But I would say peppered throughout all of our literature, there's constant and backed by plenty of verses, obviously in the Tanakh as well, which is like, it's more than meets the eye, and it's definitely not a man, and it doesn't matter if prophets come, and it doesn't matter if people are actually doing magic, right? None of that matters none of that should change your mind with regards to the things I've said and the things you've heard. So it's very, very hard for us to, as Jews, to find any wiggle room where there's like, no, there's a dude, blue eyes, red hair, 6'2", finance.
He's not a blue. He doesn't have blue eyes.
No.
It's interesting. It's interesting trying to. I think. Where do I go with this? Because I think we got to end soon. And Hezi, I'd love to continue having our argument another time. If this time works for you, maybe even next week.
But so, David, maybe I can suggest something. So, because we covered, like Hezi saying, like Jacob sees God in Esav, and you can see God in any person's face.
Yeah.
And every person is literally the image of God. And in fact, that the only image of God are people, right? I mean, the only allowed image of God are people.
Yeah.
Whether we go Benjamin Summers' way or not on how literal image is and what image means in that sense, is we can leave that aside. Like, so when we talk about Jesus saying things like, "You see me, you see the Father," like that's Jacob seeing Esav and seeing God, right? Like there's no difference in the seeing those things. And to your credit, like in your conversation with Luke, you said like the Jewish view is very coherent, and I'd say it's even coherent in understanding Jesus in the Second Temple period in like a fundamental way.
Jesus says, "Whatever you do to me," it's as though you did it to God, right? Or whatever you do the least of these,
and that he's a son of God, also.
And we're all a son of God,
And that's part of why the angels are supposed to bow down to Adam in the Quran. It's taking from a apocryphal story. It's because they're the image. Adam is the image of God, and so in the way that people fell down and worshipped an image of a god, that's the image that then gets, which is weird because the Quran doesn't have a concept that humans are made in the image of God, yet they still have a story that's a riff on exactly that concept, that what we do to each other is can be sacrilege. It's sacrilegious to mistreat.
Yeah, and I'd say all three religions understand that man is above the angels in some sense, right? There's kind of this interplay of being below and above the angels. For Christianity, it's not always clear to me if they actually believe that about anyone except for Jesus. Certainly in Judaism, like because the Psalm, like we believe that man is made like above the angels in a sense. Right. Like there's one sense where he's just below the angels. It's a different Psalm, but like because man, well, for various reasons, like
it's in the New Testament. Do you not know that you will judge angels?
Right. And this is in the New Testament. And I think part of this isn't just that this is image of God stuff, but like you have Judaism, then Christianity takes that, it's in the New Testament, and then Islam is building on that. And to some degree they accept the Psalms, though if you ask them which Psalms, it's not so clear. But like this is in those, right?
Well, Islam goes further, right? There's no Shekhinah, there's none of that gobbledygook. They don't want to hear anything about like God, like God's a feminine representation or things like that. They're not really into that. Well, maybe the Sufis are.
Well, yeah, it depends. Yeah, it's it's going to get complicated. Islam is complicated, and we can't do summation.
I don't want it. This is the thing. Is I agree with Jason, but I don't want it to be any more coherent than I think it actually is. Because like we talked about this, is sometimes things are held and it's presented to you as something which is confusing, yes. And I want to hold it as confusing,
as confusing as it needs to be. I mean,
yes. And so that's one of the reasons why I actually want to talk about the different possible interpretations of this thing, but that I also hold as a possibility of the prophets themselves considering God to have a human form.
Right. But I think but even there, right? Like Summer would say that. Like you're going further than he would. And there I would say like, but there is like, so are you actually trying to hold more than is necessary? This gets to the Luke and boundaries conversation. Right. It's like how much of that ambiguity and confusion, and like, you know, can I interpret this entire text as about being the flying spaghetti monster? Like, I'm sure someone has, but like, I would say like, you know, there's what's that phrase? Like some models are wrong and others are useful, but and then within some others are useful, there's some that are more useful than others. I would like to be in the range of more the models that are useful to different degrees and get rid of the ones that are just wrong, right? We don't have to like waste time.
Joseph, do Christians have Yud Gimel Midot Torah Nidreshet B'hem?
That's a really interesting question. They definitely have hermeneutical rules. They're not exactly the same. There's a lot of overlap with those rules and
how old would you say that is?
It depends on who you think borrowed from who,
right?
Because
let's just put it in context for David.
No. Sorry, so let's translate it first. So he's talking about we have a list of hermeneutical rules on how you can take apart a text and connect it to other pieces and verses and all this stuff. There's one list that has 13 such rules. There's another list that has 40, I think, or 42 such rules. And I think there's a third list. I don't remember. It's in between the two. And the idea that there were hermeneutical rules that would allow you to exegete a text in a meaningful way exists across a number of cultures. The Greeks had a set of rules for doing this on Homer, as far as I'm aware, though we have people in this chat who probably know this better than I do. And Young God probably knows those hermeneutics and exegetes better, I would hope. There's also the Persians, the Zoroastrians had rules for this for their sacred texts. The Jewish ones, there's a nice argument showing that the Jewish ones and the Zoroastrian ones are kind of similar, much more so than the Greek ones. And then there's a question of like, who borrowed from who, or like, is this just like logic? You know, in some ways the rules are just logic, and like, is logic just universal, and we're all going to come to.
But we'll agree
at some point.
For the sake of this conversation, when I see our boy Jesus, right, he is aware of these, and I can't imagine that he's not playing by these rules. And that's why his interpretations, and like when he's going about talking about also things that you could see in the first, second, and third chapter of Ethics of Our Fathers, where like him calling out the money changers, like all these things are already happening in the Talmud. Like we're saying the temple was destroyed because of this.
I mean, it's before the Talmud. I mean, the whole Rabban Gamliel, the Rabban Gamliel, who's in the New Testament and who's in the Mishnah, literally is the one who reforms temple money-changing practices when he becomes the head of the Sanhedrin around the time of Paul. I mean, we can.
Would you agree that Jesus is using those tools, though?
Jesus is definitely in the same milieu. Or the people who are writing Jesus and his stories are, I'm going to be more careful probably. The people who are writing the gospel are responding to very similar things as the rabbis, and at least some of them have what I would call Pharisaic or rabbinic sensibilities, and are delving into the same sorts of positions and arguments and worldviews.
And how much of that today was preserved? My point being, David, which is like, is it being weird? Going back to what Yosef was saying, like the spaghetti monster, like ultimately it could be anything, right? But because of these hermeneutic rules, you're controlling for a lot, right? It can't be this and it can't be that because of these rules that are set in place. And
sorry, one thing, Sybil's Oracle, these are not mystical rules. These are just legal rules on how you do logic and legal texts. So this is meant for everybody. This is not some secret mysteries of the initiated. We literally read these every day.
Wouldn't it be a safer bet to say that Jesus's interpretation then is closer to ours when reading the text than it is for someone else because
So Chazi, so I'm gonna try to steel man a little bit on the other side. Let's say you have Luther's reading. I'm gonna pick him of all people. I'm gonna pick I'm gonna pick Luther's reading. Like, you can, of all people, his reading of these texts. He doesn't know much about Second Temple Judaism. He doesn't have any of that context. But I think at some level there's a belief that these texts have to speak to everyone in every generation, and therefore, if this is a living text in that sense, then we need to figure out, like, I should be able to understand it given my own tools in my generation and how this applies to me. I don't know if Luther actually thought this, but like, I definitely see within all the traditions, right? These are living traditions, and we have to figure out how they apply. We have a specific way to do that in Judaism, but Christianity is also trying to wrestle with that, and I think they're bringing this in.
Yeah, but what was Jesus? What was Jesus doing? But by the way,
we care about grounding it in history. I get that. I know.
But before we even go there, just to that point, this is why I'm like very much a champion of, or of the TLC, because to me this is like very much what is needed in the Christian world, is to be able to have these conversations. So you could actually, I mean, you're not saving the Minority Report anymore, but even Paul was talking about TLC whatever.org, that website they have right now, in order to actually slowly but surely build kind of conversation. So I'm not saying that it's not coming from good faith with regards to the Christians. And I think even more so now where these debates are happening, and even more so with Jews involved in this conversation as well. But yes, like Yosef is saying, I'm just going back to historically what would make sense to me where Jesus' head is.
Well, and I have wanted to have this conversation, and I'm going to introduce it and then just leave. I'm going to close the chat after I introduce this, which I've semi-introduced in the past, is that in multiple situations in the New Testament where, specifically in the letters and in Acts, when people are attacked by the Jewish community, it is after they make mention of seeing one sitting on the chair, which sounds like it says that you are supposed to attack someone if they're explaining. This is within the Merkava mystic literature. If someone is explaining what they saw, you are not to let them say what they're saying. You're not supposed to, like, this is not something especially. So Paul publicly, or Stephen publicly, starts saying this image which they see, and this stirs the community. I think, like, I know you guys are very much, Paul is not within the school of rabbinic Judaism. To me, there is a little tiny bit that overlaps with
Merkava I say a tiny bit.
Yeah,
a tiny
sure.
bit.
No, but specifically with Merkava mysticism.
Third heaven.
He sees the third heaven, falling into the third heaven, where the third heaven, and seeing one seated on the throne. But his surprise is that the one he sees seated on the throne is Jesus.
Right. I think he went down the lane of Acher, right? He didn't heed Rabbi Akiva's warning.
And that's part of why they're being, it's not just that people are seeing Jesus, it's that they're seeing Jesus in a position that was already taboo to talk about within Jewish circles.
So I'm not sure. So I would need to check these verses, but you wanted to start this conversation and then end it. So maybe offline, or maybe now in the chat.
I gotta get back to work.
I'm gonna head out. To be continued in 40 minutes. We're doing our prayer class. Joseph, you gonna join us?
I'm gonna try. It depends on. I mean, this.
David, you
can
join.
A lot of energy. We'll see how I feel.
I have to get back to work. That's the thing. We had this conversation, and now I took too much time.
Now that you realize that you are allowed to eat from the afikomen, you have to find something else to disrupt. Okay, so
it's great. Honestly, guys, this is great news, because I this is real. I don't want to be disrespectful. I'm seeking after the God of Israel. The problem for you guys is that he spoke to me through Jesus.
Not a problem. It's all good. Keep on going to church.
This is my entry point in.
Yeah, but send us the verses maybe, and we can have a more. We can look into them a little more, and we can have that full conversation maybe.
Okay, that sounds great. And then Hezi, next week, you and me, let's try to figure something out for having some of the controversial conversations.
More controversial than this? Sure.
Yeah, I want to hear I want to hear you get upset. I want to know how Christian your kids could be before you would put some sort of limitation between. Like, I'm very interested in some conversations, and I want it to get controversial.
You got it. You got it.
Well, because I like you. Because I know you're not going to kill me. You're just going to pop my hip out of its spot. Right? I do love you guys. I hope to see you guys around.
And David, I very much see God's image when I speak to you as well. So take care. And by saying that, I mean you look like Esau. All right.
Yeah. It's worse if I look like Ishmael, if you're saying I
okay.
Looks like a bit of a jackass. Okay. I'll see you guys later. I'm ending the stream. Goodbye.
Bye, guys.